living in. So I appreciate you hopping on the Zoom. We are doing things a little bit differently for this meeting. We have a presenter with us today joining us from NASHIA. So I'm just going to do a quick roll call of everybody that I can see on the screen. And I think there's a couple of folks by phone. If I don't call your name, please unmute yourself and just let me know. So I'm just going to run through right now. I see Jess, Lorraine, Alicia, Carissa, Charles, Cheryl, Danny, Eric, Jack, Megan, Sherry, and Susan, and Bob. Did I miss anybody? Okay, I'm not hearing anyone that I missed. So I am going to just turn it over to Sherry really quickly to kind of give a little bit of background as to kind of a preface to our presentation by Susan, who has joined us from NASHIA, and we'll go from there. So Sherry, do you want to jump in? Oh, she's connecting to audio, or looks like she's reconnecting. Oh, looks like Bill just joined us. He's connecting too. Okay, so we'll wait a second.
Sarah, I'm just checking to see if mine works. Does mine work?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Good. The other day it didn't. I had to go find a phone and a phone number real quick. So you just never know.
Yeah, it seems like day to day, you never know what's going to happen with our technology. So we'll just wait a second for Sherry to see if she can rejoin. Sherry, I can see you, but you're muted. There she is. Can you hear us, Sherry?
Did everyone get kicked off?
No.
No, we're here.
Okay, I did.
Okay.
Okay, I'm using my iPhone.
I just did a quick roll call. And so Sherry, if you just want to kind of share just a brief sort of preface to Susan's presentation, that would be great. And then everybody, if you don't mind keeping yourselves on mute when you're not speaking, that would be really great. It kind of helps with any feedback. And then if you have questions that come up, you can either unmute yourself to speak, or we can also use the chat function. So I'll be monitoring that and doing the best that I can to keep up with your questions that come up in the chat function.
Okay, so I hope everyone can hear me. So just a quick introduction to set the background before Susan takes over. And I don't know what you said before, so I'm gonna just hope that this isn't repetitive. So back at our last meeting, I think it was in March, we looked at the brain injury strategic or annual action plan. And since that time, we were able to identify NASHIA to be helpful in providing us some technical assistance in regards to how we're going to evaluate the progress that we made. And as a reminder, there were kind of 3 goals that we focused on. One was about just, improving for Vermonters, their early identification or diagnosis of a brain injury and referrals of services. And I'm paraphrasing these goals. The second one was to make sure there's a comprehensive array of resources, and that was for the individuals who experience a brain injury, family, caregivers, and also the professionals that intersect with folks with services and support. And the third one was about care coordination. So those are broad goals over, the course of 5 years or maybe even 10 years, we'll have to see. But, there was a work group that came up with some great strategies, and the work group also tried to define what are called objectives, which is, again, a way to measure progress over time. And luckily, Susan and Rebecca were available, Susan primarily to help us think about what's practical as far as trying to measure how we're doing. And you as advisory board have a key role in that. You'll be helping, looking at data, hearing about challenges, creating solutions, and helping to set objectives each year about what we're going to measure. So I'm very happy. I'm going to turn it over to Susan now because I think she's got a great presentation on how she's going to teach us how to move forward and what we can measure in the first year in a nutshell. So Susan, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Yeah, thank you. And you hear me okay, right? And I had sent an email to Sherry and Sarah both this morning with a PDF, and then I was looking at the PowerPoint while going on. I have a hard time leaving off S off of Dale. I don't know why, but I always want to make it Dale's. So there's a couple things I fixed, but I fixed it in the PowerPoint. But as I said to them, feel free to stop. I'll try to pause from time to time if there's something you think you need to fill in or I've left out. Just don't hesitate to jump in and fill in when I'm missing. We were asked, first of all, I'll tell you about me. I'm from Missouri, so hi from Missouri in the Show Me State. I've been to your lovely state during fall foliage, surprise, surprise, but I have made the journey during the fall time, and it's a gorgeous state. And we like your Vermont syrup. It's great. So I feel like I'm working with some great people in Vermont. It's a wonderful state. I've known Lorraine for probably more years than we want to talk about, and Sarah more recently, but I've enjoyed re-engaging with the state and what you're trying to achieve. I've been retired actually out of state government for 18 years now. It's hard to believe, but we had an early 80 and out program and I took it. I worked for the state of Missouri. We started our advisory council in '85. I was with them for 17 years. And then they wanted rid of the baby boomers, so I just left. But I thought we would get everything done in 3 years. This is what I said at my kind of going away swan song. I thought we'd have everything done in 3 to 5 years. I couldn't believe 17 years later, we're still chipping away at the service delivery system. And since I've been gone, the Department of Health has taken up the banner. I've been real proud about what the people have done there to expand and continue even during tough budget times. So that's kind of a nice thing when you see your work has been expanded and improved upon, and even more than we even envisioned 17 years ago, or 18 years ago, whenever I did it. But anyway, that's how I got started. I was at the Department of Mental Health before that. I was a legislative person out of the director's office. We had an interim committee on brain injury in '84. So I represent the department on that. And that was kind of my entree into the brain injury world. Coming out of the Department of Health, which was such a large agency with 3 operating service divisions. Today there's 2, they combined, but alcohol and drug abuse, psychiatric services, and at the time it was called MRDD, it's intellectual and development disabilities now. Those were huge systems. And it didn't occur to me then how anybody could not get services in the state. And so I learned real quickly what some of the barriers and problems were with regard to accessing services, what some of the unique challenges are. So it's a process to get there. You've been working on it before. You've had a federal grant before, you've had a state plan, and you've done some wonderful things too in Vermont, but you always know it's an ongoing process. So I'm going to now pull up a PowerPoint. This is a little presentation, but it's also going to be interactive. I'm pretty informal. Part of this, let's see, how do I get to from the beginning? So Sherry set this up about looking at the state plan. NASHIA was asked to do several deliverables, looking at how other states measure their goals and objectives, how what is the state of the art and best practices in doing so, and also how it fit within the Administration for Community Living's performance measures. And I've written all that up. It's in, they've got a preliminary report, and after today, when you've all decided how you want to do your objectives, that'll be finalized and you'll have a written report that can go along with this. So Vermont's plan, as it's noted, it's a roadmap. And today, I think what we're going to talk about is how do we set the course. Do you all see this PowerPoint okay?
No, you got to click it again, Susan. So hover on the shared screen and share your entire window.
Okay. Just hit me that I needed to ask because I made these pretty pictures.
Yeah.
Now, where do I do that?
Hover down at the bottom and you'll see it'll.
Share screen right here.
Yeah,
right here.
There you go. You got it.
Okay.
And
So
folks,
I didn't get very far along.
I forgot to tell. Not yet, but folks can use the chat box too to ask questions. I don't know if they knew that, but I don't see it yet.
You don't see it yet? Shoot, I should have asked this before I got into my rhythm here. Now I've lost my screen, period.
So look for the little blue icon with the video, Susan, down at the bottom of your taskbar, and click that. It should bring your Zoom back up. Are you on a Windows?
Oh, I'm on my PowerPoint. That's what's happened. So where did my Zoom go?
Go look at the taskbar at the bottom and you'll see a blue icon with a video.
I see you all. Okay, but you don't see anything? Okay,
Nope.
I've got shared screen.
Yep, click it.
I did.
And you want to click share the entire screen and then hit the share button on the right corner. So when you click the green button that says share screen.
I did.
Click the shared, there's a share button on the right corner. You got to click that.
I have share screen, record, and reactions.
Yeah, I don't think you're in the right spot. Here, let me share my screen. Okay, watch, Susan. Sorry, folks. So what I've done is I have my controls at the top now, but usually they're at the bottom.
Yeah, they're at the bottom on mine.
Okay. And I'm gonna
you got a little camera thing. I gotta find that little camera.
See, when you click share screen, it gives you this, Susan, do you see?
Yeah.
And there's a little share button on the bottom, see that?
Yeah, I've got that one. It says I cannot do it while you're on it, but I've got that one. I just don't see where that little camera guy is. So I got shared screen.
Yep.
And do I want to do it up here? Do you see it now?
Yep, it's coming. There it is.
Oh, gosh.
Yep, you got it.
Oh, my gosh. Well, I only got into slide 2. I want you to see my pretty picture anyway. So. All right. So there we go. Now you see it? Okay.
Yep.
See, I got a pretty roadmap. That's our roadmap. So your Vermont plan stated that it is a roadmap. And today we're going to talk about setting the course and how we're going to develop measurable objectives over the next year to do so. And I can see you all, guys. This is good. Sarah, I see you. So if you need me to stop me, raise your hand. Okay, I can see you real well. So Yogi Berra is a Yankees baseball player, but you know he's from St. Louis, Missouri. So we claim him in Missouri, and we like all his little sayings. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. And that's why we try to do objectives that states where we're going. You all were involved with your state planning. Sherry gave you an overview of your state plan. You did so based on a needs and resource assessment and input from consumers and families that set your direction and your overall goals for the plan. And in that plan, even though you don't say vision, you have a vision statement that's basically in there. And you have a mission, which is why you exist, your purpose. And in this instance, I cited Dale because it has a mission and a purpose, and that's a plan. Their plan is attached to Dale. Goals are your broad outcome. And then I highlighted objectives because those are the measurable steps to achieve goals. And then your strategies are your tactics for getting there. So I took a sentence in your plan, and I think Sherry stated it already, and I made that your vision statement because that's what you said. Vermonters will be identified and referred to high quality, comprehensive array of services, resources, and supports. And that's the overall vision you're having and why your goals are set out the way they are to accomplish that. And then I use Dale's mission, which is to make Vermont the best state in which to grow old or to live with a disability, with dignity, respect, and independence. So Dale has that mission, and that's why it's involved with the brain injury program, that it's going to try to help you achieve that vision. Sherry mentioned your goals. They were improve early identification and timely referrals to appropriate services and supports. You were going to ensure access to resources, and you were going to increase brain injury service coordination across systems of care that address the whole person's needs. So what Sherry and Sarah and I have been talking about is how do you break that down into a year where you have something that you're working toward, that you can state what you're going to do, how you're going to measure it. And it's just one piece of what I call a building block. You know, it's just a way of hacking at that till you get to where all you want to be. So you got to do some things to get there. So this first year, what is it you're going to do to help you achieve those goals? So most people are, I guess, the state of the art in writing objectives happens to be SMART objectives. And as you'll see, I do like quotes. Here's one: plan your work and work your plan. So that's basically what we're talking about, is how you're going to operationalize that plan to make it be working. So it's just not a sitting document on a shelf, as we sometimes stay with state plans. So how are we going to make it work? In this instance, where I took what SMART objectives are, it uses the term achievable. I think the rest of my presentation, I use the term attainable, but it's the same thing. So when you look at an objective, it should be specific. Anyone can understand it. It's measurable. How the action will be measured, how it helps you to keep on track and determine your progress. It's achievable. The objective is realistic or attainable, as I've used later. It's relevant. It fits the purpose of the grant and Dale. It fits the culture of your state and service delivery framework of your state. And it addresses the overall vision of the project. And then, of course, it's time bound. Every objective has a specific timeline for completion. Now, I am real good at borrowing from others, and I found this wonderful handout that SAMHSA did for their grantees that were involved with Native American projects. And they used the word attainable, and I stuck with it because I liked it. And they basically had a chart on tips for writing SMART objectives. And you can read here on being specific, define what you expect, who's going to do it, where's the accountability, use action verbs, provide enough detail that it's clear what you're going to be, and that's the specificity of the objective. And then it's measurable. Identify how will you know when that objective was accomplished. And I think this is real important because we always have such broad ambitions, big ambitions. Everybody's going to get this, everybody's going to get that. We're going to have everything in place. And so to get there, how do you measure that? So I think that's why it's good to have these objectives that kind of start defining that. So you're moving toward everybody having something. But if you're thinking everybody's going to have something, how are you going to ever know when that's going to get there? So I think that measurable is really important to figure out what it is you do and how you've measured it to know that you're making headway into everybody getting it, if that makes sense. And then the attainable is, do you have, I say, person power, manpower, resources, the authority to achieve the objective? Is it something you can do? And is it relevant? And in this instance, does the objective help you meet your grant and your state plan? And is it time bound? Does it have an objective should be completed? These are action objectives. I actually have a page in a folder whenever I have to write a project up so I can remember what action objectives are. It's kind of my little cheat sheet. And these are some good words to use. I usually use words like expand, increase. These are action, provide, develop, create. Those are all action. What's not an action is when you say to understand. How do you measure that, to understand? But if you teach, if you train, those are all action verbs, and then you can write in how you going to measure that in terms of people understanding. So those are just a little cheat sheet that I use. So here comes the good part. This is the part where we're going to talk about you all and get input. Sherry and Sarah and I met last week. We took each of the three main goals under the three main headings that you had, and we tried to develop an objective for each one for the year. So we're looking at this, what can you do within a year's period? How are you going to do it and get there? And if you get it done and want to add more objectives, there's nothing wrong with that. But this was just a jumping off point, I would say. And so what I want to do then now is kind of talk about what we came up with, and then you fill in the blanks as to what you think needs to be said. All right, does that make sense? So the goal was to improve the early identification of brain injury and timely referrals to services and supports. And the objective we wrote was the BIA of Vermont will hold, and I don't know how many trainings, that would have to be decided, for how many service providers and professionals on the early symptoms of brain injury and available resources in order to refer individuals to the appropriate providers by May 31st. So when we look at this objective, let's see if it fits within this SMART format. So specific who, and we put Brain Injury Association of Vermont. And Sarah, do you want to talk why we did that? Your contract with BIA Vermont on what they're supposed to do?
So as you're all aware, Brain Injury Association of Vermont is one of our key partners for the TBI State Partnership Grant. And so as the grant was developed, this was one of our, they were already had specific goals listed that they were going to attain via the grant work. And so this kind of ties right into that as far as creating additional awareness around brain injury and doing trainings and outreach to different provider groups.
Great, thank you. So that was something I learned last week, so I thought I'd tell how that got there. We talked about who this training would be targeted to. I think Sarah and Sherry and I talked about maybe one group to start with are your social workers and discharge planners at hospitals. Maybe that's the point of where you want to do some training to understand brain injury, the resources, and do referral. That would be one point in the whole system as you look at the different points where people with brain injury are interacting with service delivery, whether it's at the hospital, where it's emergency room, or whether it's a rehab provider, or with book rehab, or wherever they're interacting. So in our thoughts, we thought, well, one place to start that is social workers and discharge planners, but that is something maybe the group could talk about. And then the BIA will then identify that target group, who to train, to set the dates. We talked about whether it's going to be virtual or on site. In today's environment, so much is being done virtual, and a lot of people are doing online training now where they have curriculums online, so it's not a one-shot deal. So deciding how you want that to be, is that going to be a one-time training or a package? They would be responsible for notifying, arranging for trainers, and I put providers as speakers. I think sometimes just to consider it, you don't have to do it, but sometimes when you're doing training to talk about resources available, it's nice to hear from the providers to tell what their eligibility criteria is, who they serve, and what it is they do. So it helps your providers to familiarize themselves with each other. And then kind of you can kind of figure out, I think BIA Vermont, you told me, Sarah, is also the point for information and referral in this scheme. Is that right?
Yeah, so the Brain Injury Association of Vermont is sort of our, we want that to be our go-to place for individuals and, who've experienced brain injury and or their family members and caregivers. So kind of a first point of contact or referral point, if you will. So that's something we've been talking about a lot with them.
So I'm going to run through the rest of the SMART part, and then we'll go back and maybe we can discuss what if this is on target. Does that make sense? And then what we need to do to fill in.
And I would just add, Susan, that as we go through this, we have people that represent different organizations or they're self-advocates. So always be thinking about, this, but about the who. So in this case, it was easy because it's the Brain Injury Association of Vermont, and we have a grant agreement with them. But you can also be thinking about, like with the Disability Law Project or with BOC Rehab, what is it that you might be doing that could fit into this and come up with a SMART objective? So I just want people, as you go through, Susan, be thinking about that, because we really focused on what Dale and BIA Vermont could do when we were looking at these SMART objectives.
I think we were trying to keep it focused so you had something to start and measure with, but it doesn't preclude anyone from doing work along the way, is what you're saying, if I'm hearing you right. And I think when we go back and talk about this, let's just see if this objective makes sense, and then who you think, with BIA Vermont, who provides that input? Is this the advisory board that's providing input then in terms of who they think should be a target group on training, or is this something that's in a contract and then they just do it? So if you measured this, then your measure would be how many trainings, the number of training years providing. Maybe it's one training, maybe it's one workshop to fill in. You can measure that. And the number of people trained. So maybe your objective is to say you will hold one training session for 20 people or 20 providers. And then that's something that at the end of the year or after it happens, if you achieved it. And you've achieved it because of the attendance and who participated. And you'll probably have an evaluation in there as well as terms of the training. And then it'd be accountable to Dale and the advisory board. So basically your objective would be to have a training to so many people that's going to be documented. And the reason that it's attainable is because you just mentioned it, your contract. And is your federal funding program, your grant program, for providing that to Vermont BIA, Sarah, to make this happen? Is that under part of your federal grant?
So Sarah's Zoom is frozen. She just texted me. So Susan, what was the question again?
I put in here attainable because it's the ACL TBI State Partnership Program grant provides funding for training. So I was assuming that your contract with the BIA of Vermont was being funded through the federal grant. Okay.
Yes, that is the case. And just so you know, there was a comment or a question, Susan, on the chat box about whether brain injury survivors can get an opportunity to comment on the specifics. And I said, of course, that'll happen. Yes. We'll get the information out through our various, groups. And it's always, we can make improvements and changes. It's not a static thing.
No, and that's the purpose of today, was to get some discussion. So I was kind of running through how it meets a SMART, if it meets or doesn't meet the SMART format, and then to go back and talk about filling it in, what's missing. So, and the rationale for this would be that it's based on your 2018 needs assessment on brain injury that was administered by the BIA Vermont, and it's based on experienced advisory board members, where the consensus is that is too long before there is a diagnosis and referral to appropriate services. So that's why this goal was identified, and that's why that objective was to do some training around brain injuries, so people coming in at the hospital level or any level would understand what brain injury is and what the services are to refer. And then time bound, I think all of these objectives we talked about, Sherry, were to end May 31st, 2021. So they're one-year objectives.
Yep.
So if you go back and look at the objective, does it meet those criteria? The BIA of Vermont will be the who's responsible, and you'll have to define how many trainings they're going to have, and that's probably where you get to have input to that. And I would assume BIA Vermont would work with you and your advisory board on how many trainings they think they can do over the next year, or I call it a
Yep.
training, it's a workshop, and
Yep.
for how many service providers and who that target audience is going to be.
Yep.
And
Yep.
then that will be, that tells you what you're going to do, and you're going to do it on the early symptoms of brain injury and available resources with hope of referring individuals to appropriate providers. And the by May 31st really pertains to the training. It's kind of in the, maybe it's in the wrong order. It's, looks like it means referral to appropriate providers by May 31st, but really it's the training I think you're trying to get under your belt by then.
Yeah. And I think just to add, the nice thing about having a year thing to measure is we can account for, you know, factors that are out of our control, like COVID-19, which may mean that training is delivered in a different way versus live or in person, you know, virtual and things like that. And when people would be comfortable to come to workshops, so or trainings, or to go to their office spaces for training. So
right.
We'll
and
have those.
Yeah, and Sherry, what you're alluding to are those strategies that's not in here. You know, we talked about measurable objectives, and your strategies in behind it will be that level of detail. Are you going to have a subcommittee to do it? Is BIA Vermont going to convene a subcommittee of the council, or how are they going to go about deciding, and how are they going to identify, and how all the stuff you just discussed really was in your strategies as to the, you know, as they say, the devil's in the details. What are the tasks that are going to have to take place? And you have several tasks there in terms of determining what that training looks like, who you're targeting it to, who you're inviting, and how it's delivered. As you said, is it delivered virtual, or is it going to be delivered in person, or is it something that's going to be housed on your website all the time, or the BIA of Vermont's website all the time for people to access? All that will be done in your strategies that you're talking about. So do we think this objective meets the SMART? Is this an objective that you think makes sense to do that goal? Is it a first step in the process to trying to meet that goal? And it's obviously not going to be your only step in the only objective to meet that goal, but is it a good first step towards that goal? Is it something that you think is doable and measurable? Can you see this happening? Does it meet what we just talked about? Is anybody commenting? I can't tell.
I'm looking at the chat box and I don't see anything right now, but if anyone wants to unmute, they can. If they have any comments about this one, we'll move to the next.
This is Lorraine. I think it's measurable, and it articulates well what we want to move forward with.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then the next one that we looked at is under your resource enhancement and development means. And that goal was to ensure access to a comprehensive array of resources for individuals with a brain injury and their families, healthcare providers, our professionals, and service providers. And the objective that we came, I feel like I'm at a game show, and the objective that we came up with last week among the three of us looking at that SMART format is this, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to walk through the objective. I'll walk through how we thought it fit within that framework, and then I'll go back and we'll talk about it again and see what you think, okay? So the objective was, and it's back to BIA Vermont, with input from the advisory board, will provide information and resources available to the public by May 31st, 2021. So that's a year. So the who, we put BIA Vermont, and it's with Dale's, and we've got them as a co-person, a co-entity responsible for this objective. And the what is the website updated. And as I understand, part of the Vermont BIA contract was to update and revise their website. And I also understand there's I may have this wrong, but it's my understanding that there's also been some investment into a marketing committee through the BIA Vermont to do some public awareness and education around resources and brain injury. So the detail to this would be the BIA Vermont and Dale, with input from the advisory board, will identify resources, materials to make available on website and to inform the public. The measurable would be how many resources are identified, documented by, posted on the website. You know, your website's either going to happen or not happen. You're going to be accountable to Dale and the advisory board. Is it attainable? The ACL-TBI State Partnership Program grant provides funding for BIA Vermont. The rationale is this priority builds resources or enhances existing resources for individuals, families, caregivers, and the providers that deliver services, and that's in your state plan. It's time bound because, again, May 31st, 2021. So let's just back up here and talk about the objective. Will this objective help with getting information and resources out to the public? Are there any comments about that?
Okay, so I'm looking in the chat box. And I'm biased, so I won't say anything.
You can't criticize it.
Yeah, okay.
I've unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank
Yes.
you.
This is Bill Morgan. I'm a survivor. I think that it's a good objective. I think we need to be cautionary, though, about becoming too dependent upon the website, because I think there's still a large segment of the population that doesn't necessarily have access to a computer or a website. So we have to use that as one of the tools, but we need to be careful to reach out to survivors and their families in a way at the appropriate time. And that's not always if they're exiting the hospital. I mean, that was my own personal experience and my family's experience, that I wasn't really ready for a lot of that stuff at that point in time. So it's somehow bridging that gap between when you may be leaving your initial set of care and when you actually are physically and mentally ready to start looking at other resources and seeking assistance.
And I think
I was just going to say, those are really good points. I want to comment on the internet. I think that's been the issue too that we found during COVID. A lot of states that work with people with brain injury, they can't be in touch with. They've lost connection with because they don't have internet access or computers. Some states have actually bought tablets for that, but still it's very difficult. And that's been pointed out, I think, during this stay-at-home rules that we've all been under. So it does need to be in multi-venues over time. The other point you made is an excellent point. We started off with materials, I was telling them, back in '86 and have been doing it for 30 some odd years, making materials available at the time of hospitalization when people are discharged. And the same thing happens 2 or 3 years later, your needs change. You mentioned you may not have been ready for it, but also people's needs change, you know, is over time. And so it really needs to be in several places. That we learned that lesson too, about how do you make the right information at the right time where it's timely in a way that makes sense to people that will help them connect into what they need.
Yep. agreed. And I just want to say that there were some chat that said computers are difficult to use and suffering a brain injury, understanding this is low-lying fruit for quick success, but we have to look at other actions. The other thing that was brought up is the word resources. So it seems a little vague, the word resources. What kind of resources are we talking about? Are they in addition to the resources that exist or new and different resources? So I think we just have to work on this to define it a little bit more. And I think, again, we need to come up with other ways of focusing on how the information is shared in, you know, outside of the web and the internet.
I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Oh, okay. Can you hear me now?
No, it's Bill. I can hear Bill.
I'd offer two additional things, I guess, for observations. One, please keep in mind that people who have gone through a trauma like this, that their families are also in trauma too. So even though they're handed material or shown something at one particular time, they may not really connect with that or even remember that they received that. And so we need a mechanism somewhere in the process to ensure that those people are reached out to a second time or at a later time after the initial traumas occur. And then as far as resources and stuff, I would come back to most of us that have head injuries at some point, even if we spend time in hospitals or rehab centers, as I do, end up back with our primary care physicians. And so they somehow need to be better aware of those resources and how to tie their patients and families that have had traumatic brain injuries into those resources or make them aware of where they can find it.
I think the follow-up point is an excellent point on how you follow up with people. I think states have done that differently. We tried it with letters and we were not very successful through the registry. We thought we had names of people that were hospitalized, and so we would follow up with a letter, and people thought, why am I getting a letter? And so some other ways that we've tried in our state, and I didn't do it, so it's tried, and some other states have. How do you work with the social worker and discharge planners to connect to somebody? And I would assume in this instance it would be the BIA Vermont, because that's where your information referral capacity is going to be housed. But the follow-up, I think, is something to work on, how you follow up and help people. And we found people ask for help and assistance one period of time and they get along fine, and 5 years later show up back again when there's something else that happens. They lose a job or I don't know, something happens, and then they're back into system. So you want something that where people understand how to do that, how to come back in and out to get information and help. I don't know, Sherry, have you all had discussion on your follow-up piece?
Yeah.
Or Sarah, are you back, Sarah?
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry, I got kicked off for a little bit, but I'm back. Yeah, we've had lots of conversations through, you know, the state plan work group and through the advisory board, just around how we do connect people to initially to the BIA Vermont. And so that's kind of where, you know, part of our media plan that we have around creating awareness is to direct people to the BIA through to their helpline initially, but then also, as we talked about in the prior goal and objective, just around, you know, educating providers too, and getting them to not only be able to identify that somebody has a brain injury, but knowing where to refer them to as well. And so, you know, we know those transition times can be really challenging in so many ways for people, that we have had a lot of discussion about it and have generated a lot of great ideas, which are again coming out today too, which is awesome. So I'm taking good notes about everything. And I think we can certainly add to the objectives that we have here
I think so too. And I think you can add to the objectives that's still doable, in the next year. You're chipping away at that point to try to do that. We ended up with service coordination, and I know that Sarah and Sherry have talked about this, or Sherry and Sarah both have talked about this. How can you put service over the long haul vision, in the big scheme, and as you head down this path, how can you start developing some of that capacity within the system, particularly for people who are not Medicaid eligible, since you do have some of that through your Medicaid program? How can you offer that kind of assistance? And I hate to keep saying we, only reason I'm talking about Missouri is just because our lessons learned, and I'm not doing it, so I can't take any credit or I can't take any criticism either. Not there anymore, but we found that people needed more service coordination and asked for that more than they did for services. That seemed to be what people wanted. They wanted assistance. But so Bill, I wrote down your notes, and I think Sarah and Sherry and I can circle back as to whether it is low-hanging fruit on the web page. That's why we put it in there. We thought that was something that could be accomplished, but how else and can we further refine what resources are and what other means to make that available to people? We did talk about the 211 system, and Sarah thought that was already housed within your 211 system, which is another system for the general public to access information. But are there other, how else do you get information to the right people at the right time? That's what it's all about. Anything else?
I was just going to say one more example. One thing that we had talked about, Sherry and I had met with discharge planners a while ago at the hospital, and just having some sort of referral process, like have individuals opt in to be able to have the hospital make a referral to Brain Injury Association of Vermont, but then give folks some time to have that transition, and then have the Brain Injury Association contact them a couple months down the road, or at other touchstone or milestone points in time, to see how folks are doing. So that's just something I'm throwing out there that we can think about if it's some sort, if we think it might be an attainable objective.
I have a friend that I know through gardening. My little side hobbies is kind of actually is traveling, looking at other people's gardens. This is my side hobby. But she's a physical therapist, and I had her give a program on falls on older adults, one of the organizations I belong to. And she said, we do a good job at the hospital in the ER when they come in to talk about falls and to assess whether they're having a concussion. But she said, we never follow up after that. We never follow up 6 months later to see if there's any problems, or 3 months if there's any problems that have arisen that wouldn't have been noticed the day of. So I guess as you're talking, I don't know enough about hospital systems, Sarah, to know if discharge planners and social workers, or if anybody within those programs, and maybe that's getting to you, Bill, where you talked about the primary care physician who soon takes over. If there's a way to figure out how those people, since they're having the first point of contact with people, could help follow up or refer for follow up. I'm sure it's all about payment system and what's allowed with and what they can do, but it was just something she made a comment on.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Okay, anything else?
No, I just think this one, the second one, we just have to, come back with some, I think it's going to have multiple objectives and define the factors that people have been asking about. So it's all great stuff. We got it in the chat box and we'll do some work on that.
Good, good. I can't see the chat box. So, you all can criticize me all up one side, down the other, because I can't see it. In fact, I can see Bill and Sarah, who I'm seeing. That's why I feel like I'm having a discussion with Bill because I can see him. All right, so the third was under the heading of comprehensive coordinated services. And this is where addressing screening comes in. Increased number of brain injury screening, assessment, service coordination across systems of care that experience co-occurring conditions often experienced by individuals with brain injury. Actually, last week when we talked about this, I think we, Sarah and Sherry both thought maybe start with an agency that would be most easy to as a I don't want to say try, as a pilot that you have good relationship with, to pilot screening among a population or a group of people that then can be broadened out to other groups like behavioral health, et cetera. So the thinking was identify individuals with TBI and VR systems using the HELP screening tool by May 31st, 2021. That was the objective. And in that, they put the responsibility to Dale, and the what would be the screening, and the detail to it would be the project director. I think that's Sherry. I'm not sure who the project director is, but an advisory board will coordinate, come up with an agreement and commitment with the VR agency to identify programs to screen, to develop instructions on training on how you screen, what those procedures would look like, and how to report numbers identifying. So that's that. I think Sarah's thinking, I don't want to speak for Sarah, but I think she's thinking the VR agency is in their agency, right? That might be the place to start screening that then you can broaden out to other agencies. So is it measurable? Well, how many programs will conduct screening, identifying your numbers? It would be documented by your agreement with the VR and your procedures for screening. It'd be accountable to Dale Advisory Board. It's attainable. And the justification in this is we put the ACL TBI Partnership Program Grant. And I thought I had, yeah, the justification, it would be under that. But then the rationale for doing this one is that it would build resources or enhance existing resources by really working with the VR system, really to better serve TBI or brain injury by identification. And that VR participates on the advisory board and VR is within Dale. That was kind of the thinking behind that. And the time is the same framework. So let's back up, and then if you want to talk, Sarah, about why we singled out VR as a place.
So Sherry and I are participating, and also Jess from BIA participate in one of our work groups with our mentor states, and we're doing we have a focus on transitions and employment. And so we've been working on, developing core competencies around brain injury for vocational rehabilitation counselors. And then as we kind of done work through that work group, Sue is on our advisory board who works at vocational rehabilitation. And so we're just also trying to look at, how can we work with other providers and groups to support them working with individuals with brain injury. And, potentially one of the first steps is just having folks be able to do a quick screen for life. It would be focused on lifetime history of traumatic brain injury. But then, certainly if somebody has screen positive, that can be very informative and helpful to the VR counselor working with that individual, just knowing that, oh, potentially this person, has a brain injury, and, some of the symptoms or challenges they're experiencing is related to this and not something else. And so, as you know, Department of Corrections, who is our other key grant partner, is already screening individuals going into the correctional system using the HELPS tool. So one of our goals is to kind of broaden this out to other providers and folks working with individuals, a group of people, and out of that group of people, individuals who might have experienced a brain injury.
So this could help dovetail with that. If you've got corrections identifying people with brain injury and you got VR better informed about people with brain injury, VR might be one of the services that the correctional facility will want to involve with, that people are getting. They're not discharged. What are they when they leave correctional facilities? They're not discharged. They're
I think Jack knows the term. I can't
What's
remember
the
it. Transition, probation.
yeah. Yeah, released. Thank you. I couldn't think of what to call it. when they're released from a facility, I think some of the goals are to try to get them hooked up into community programs and back to employment. So they're, you know, not just dropped off the bus into the community with a, you know, we'll see you later. So I think this may have some good correlation with that. And I'm sure that's what you were thinking. I can see that now, that you want Voc Rehab would be one of those agencies that could be involved with people coming out of corrections or been involved with corrections to get a job.
Yeah, and this population in general. Yep.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Sue. Yeah, I work for Voc Rehab in Rutland, Vermont. And we have been trained a couple of times. I think Barb Winters, the former program director, did some traveling along with others to do training on the HELPS tool, and maybe when it was being developed or some of the other protocols. So certainly it's probably, people will need a refresher, but that's certainly something that I think would be fairly easy. It's probably been like maybe a couple of years now, but.
You know, it's good that you said that, Sue. This is Sherry, because again, we were trying to think in 12 months, where is the capacity, you know? And so we were thinking Voc Rehab had a certain level of capacity that we could build off of. But again, this was one that I think that when we looked at it with Susan, there was a slightly different objective there originally, and then we didn't think that one would work. So we did kind of look within who's in our advisory board, who's within Dale. Could we replicate the success of corrections, who screens universally everyone? You know, so, and then I like the additional idea, Susan, of connecting those that are going to be discharged from corrections. That's the word Jack says is used, and connecting them with Voc Rehab, you know, just as another resource. So I think it's great to have everyone listening to this, because then it, you know, either makes sense or it doesn't make sense.
Well, and then maybe after all that rolls out in a couple of years and you have more funding, when does your grant end anyway? Does it end next year?
2021, May 31st, yeah.
So once you get some of that in, maybe then the next big piece would be behavioral health. And that really does tie all those areas together.
So we actually, Sherry and I had a conversation this morning with people from the Office of Economic Opportunity, and just talking about homelessness and, you know, doing screening, reaching out to different, you know, provider groups and populations that they're working with to also institute some screening, just so people do get referred to the right resources at the right time. So it all, and with that conversation stemmed into branching off from this potential screening with VR to then planning for our next round of grant funding and how we can build off from what we've already started and expand it. So you're right, it kind of all ties
Right
together.
So let's see, did I go through all of these? So is this a keeper?
Yeah, I think that we just need to, you know, have some conversations with Voc Rehab to see, you know, how it would work, what their input is, and then move through with the different strategies that are
That would be your strategy.
necessary.
Have that conversation. Develop agreement, maybe target, if you want to target community providers, who you're targeting, your counselors, community providers. I'm not sure how your VR system is set up in Vermont. But you know, even when you do training, I mean, you have such turnover. Don't you have turnover in some of those community systems? It seems like it doesn't hurt, like you said, refresh people, especially as changes take place in systems.
We would definitely want to do some refreshment. Like I say, most of the counselors, I mean, there is some turnover. I guess I had a question for Sherry. Were you thinking that you would sort of like what probation or correction system does, screen everybody, or are you thinking?
No, it would be a pilot to begin with. Yeah.
Once we, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, because again, we have to take into considering where is Voc Rehab with their capacity. Corrections was in a very different place, so they were ready, you know, to screen everyone. So pilots are always good.
Yeah, a lot of people do these at intake is what they find. It's easier to start making it part of your intake. I assume now,
Yeah.
since you all, Voc Rehab, you'll have to help me here. It's been a while, but doesn't Voc Rehab report numbers of brain injury and in its reportable disabilities? And how do they do that? Do they just look at medical documentation or somebody's self-reporting?
That's a great question. I can ask Alice Porter. She's our IT manager. I don't think it's in the narrative. It's not in our screening, right? I mean, they do keep track of disabilities via drop down, and they're more TBI is one of them. But I'll have to ask Alice if that's a reportable data piece.
Yeah, Sue, Alice gives us data, gives Dale data on employment for individuals who've been identified as having a TBI.
She does. Okay, that answers the question.
I think there is one other suggestion here is education professionals around screening and returning to school, but I'm not, I think I'd have to check what is meant by educational professionals. I think it's schools. Let's see. Oh, returning to college with brain injury. Okay, so I think that this is just another suggestion of another group to work with in this regards, so that, you know, we end up getting the accommodations for the return to learn, not only return to work, which is Voc Rehab, but we got to look at return to learn. Thank you, Cheryl. That's, I get it.
You've got your next grant written, haven't you? Let's see, you're going to do, I mean, your next grant, you got education, college, behavioral health. What was the other one? Homelessness. You know, I think you're, this is kind of a stepping stone to go bigger for next time, right? Get the first things under your belt and then you can broaden it.
Yeah, I think some things, again, if we have conversations first to see where, for instance, schools are public K through 12, and, you know, we had the conversation with the homelessness state system folks. So I think it'll help us figure out, okay, where along the timeline do things kind of fit in? Because there, you know, some people may be ready. I do think that the public schools may be more ready than colleges, but colleges are important to keep in mind for people coming back from a brain injury.
You know, and the other thing is you talked about BIA Vermont. We're back to them again. I don't know. Are they on the board today? We're talking about them a lot.
Justin, Danny, and Chris, I think it's three of them on, all three of them.
Okay. Their probably ears are burning thinking, why do they keep talking about us? But you said the other day they also have an annual conference. Is that right? That where some of this, as we were talking about the objectives, we were talking about strategies. Those could be some of the strategies to doing some of that education and training. But that might be a place to kind of roll out some of these other things as a starting point. You know, maybe have a session on homelessness to kind of get the dialogue going in the state. Have somebody come in and talk about what's the likelihood, the percentages of people with homelessness that are also have a brain injury. And it's often that is also compounded by alcohol and drug abuse and other issues. And then, or if it's on education, you could do a session to kind of get that dialogue and that information out there as you think about your next grant or where you go with it. So BIA Vermont, your ears should have been burning last week because we thought, oh, you're the go-to people to help make some of this happen. So I hope they're smiling. Are they smiling? I can't see them.
I would say from the education standpoint, I know that that's, you know, a broader goal or a longer range goal, but I really think having been both a teacher and a school board member, that there's a real opportunity here to push things out to some of the teaching staff and support staff in a school system through the in-service days that all schools have, and then you have more boots on the ground, because it's the teachers and those people that are going to recognize if even if someone isn't diagnosed with a brain injury, that their performance isn't what it was in the classroom a few weeks ago or a month ago, or they're showing up at the school nurse for Tylenol, or because they've had headaches and never were there before. I mean, I think that it's an opportunity through that channel to broaden identification of people who are potentially impacted before it affects them academically long term. And I also would hope, having been a teacher, that as an organization in the longer term, that we're pushing the colleges that are training teachers to do some hands-on training or provide that as part of their curriculum in preparation for teaching certificates.
You know, there are a couple models out there, and Sarah knows them, that have been around for a while with regard to educators. It came out of Kansas. I always give Janet Tyler the credit for it, but it's one that Colorado and a lot of states have done. And that is where they have developed consultants that can work with educators around developing IEPs. And that's people that would be under special education, that provide a training curriculum, and they've got a system in place so that they're there to help teachers with developing IEPs and appropriate educational strategies. So that's one model. But another thing that's happening over the last couple of years as a result of the return to play laws is that we got about 12 states or so now that are doing return to learn laws. And some states are beginning to put in concussion management teams, and those students aren't necessarily going to be in special ed. They're coming back to regular classroom. So it's, you know, they've been identified. Sometimes some states have kind of broadened that more than just sports related concussions, but concussions. And then they put in place some concussion management teams that can then help what you're talking about in terms of looking at the symptoms over the long term, how it's impacting academic learning. So there's a couple good models out there. Sometimes they're hard to get them all implemented everywhere in every school district, but I don't know how many school districts you have. It may be a little bit easier with being a little bit smaller state to do some of those models. Anything else?
It's very interesting because, again, just to see people are doing exactly what I was hoping, is coming up with, you know, how this would work with other organizations or partners or part of the workforce. So this is good information. We just have to figure out who we need to connect to have those conversations, to see what's possible and when and how much they would commit to it, getting commitment and engaging in it.
Right, and I don't know, I know COVID has changed a lot of things in terms of conferences. I don't know how much has that changed in your state anyway. When I was working, education paid for a lot of conferences, special ed administrators, the paraprofessionals. They had a whole bunch of them where they'd have over 1,000 people coming, and I always did exhibits and stuff. Well, now they don't do those anymore. They had early childhood, and they would pay for speakers to come in and talk about brain injury because they had the captive audience of educators. Well, then they switched to where they made kind of like regional training centers that local school districts could access, and then the local school districts were prioritizing, which meant special ed was at the bottom usually of the list, and then brain injuries even further. So I don't know how you do or how your Department of Education engages in training and more, but that all changed before I even retired. Doing away with those big conferences. They were trying to put it all locally. So it really puts special ed, or it puts people with brain injury competing for training and resources in our state. So I don't know how yours works.
Yeah, I think they did away with the annual fall conference for educators. And they called it and they have in-service days by supervisory union or school. But again, I feel like we have a connection, a new connection with the Principals Association, which was pretty positive. And then I think that someone mentioned that the Community College of Vermont might be good partners. And then there's UVM, because we are small enough. It's the Vermont College System and UVM and CCV. I think those are the players. There's some private colleges, but maybe start with the more public ones.
Good. Good. Well, that's kind of exciting when you think about it. You know, it seems so overwhelming when you think about estate planning, you think of the big picture, but then when you stop and talk about it, you just have to figure out where to start and go, right? And as opportunities arise, and that's the other thing about estate plan is you try to meet it all out to where it's making sense and you have your work figured out. But then things come along that you don't expect that really do make a difference, and an opportunity you can take advantage that really just moves something that you didn't foresee. You know, you just don't foresee.
Yeah.
So I'm just about ready to close. I added this, Sarah and Sherry, around monitoring your progress. I'm assuming you've got some of that on who reports, how you keep track of it. I do know because of your grant, you do have those lovely progress reports, performance measures that the administration of community living wants. So you're reporting on that. I'm assuming you report progress in your advisory board. I don't know if you do it monthly or quarterly, but I'm sure you got a mechanism in place to where you can kind of keep a pulse on things. And then because I do like my little quotes, and I can't even read it because my little, oh shoot, what happened to it? I was trying to move it over because I was having trouble seeing it with all your pictures to the right. I can't remember my little slide, but I did find this little quote by this guy. I don't even know who he is. Oh shoot, where was he? I had a nice inspirational quote. Okay. To embark on the journey toward your goals and dreams require bravery. To remain on that path requires courage. The bridge that merges the two is commitment. And I think the one thing I think about groups like this, when you've got advisory boards and people that are involved professionally and personally, there is that commitment that drives it. And it's often that commitment that makes state government and federal government to do the right things, because there's so many people that are dependent on it. So I like to have a nice little closing saying, and that's the one I came up with today. So it sounds to me like you've got good commitment on your board, and you've got a lot of opportunities that you're trying to take advantage of. And I'm just going to leave it to Sarah and Sherry to finish out and then tell me what they want me to do next.
So just exit your shared screen if you go to the top, Susan, so we can look at people, except my camera's not working. So
how do I do that?
If you go up to
share,
you should be able to just unshare your
stop
view.
Share. Stop share.
There you go.
So easy. Stop share.
All right, there we go. Excellent. So I think that was a great conversation and very helpful, Susan. Thank you. And I just wanted to check in to see if there was anything in the chat box that you want to make sure that you share with the full group. I think Sarah and I tried to reiterate what we saw in the chat box, but it wasn't always 100%. That we want to keep in mind, because again, there'll be another draft. And I forgot to mention, NASHIA stands for the National Association of State Head Injury Administrators. I think I got that right.
Got it.
I forgot to say that at the beginning. So I'll just, you know what I'm going to do? I'm just going to go around the room and just check to see if anyone had a question or a comment. So I see Eric, anything that, this is a first stab. There'll be, another round.
No, I think it's a good start.
Okay, thank you. Alicia?
I think that these are good starts to objectives.
Okay. How about you, Charles? We didn't have anything on the law project, so I don't know.
I agree. This is a great great start. So.
Oh, okay, great. Danielle, Danny, no, Sarah, Bill.
I'm very impressed with the work that's gone into it. I know it's not an easy task, and you've all done a good job in trying to organize this and get it moving. And it's a positive step for everyone, whether you're a survivor, a caregiver, or somebody who in any way is connected to people that are going through these things. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sue?
I don't have any additional comments. I thought it was great work. You know, writing objectives is really hard.
Yes.
So this is tough work. Really good. You know, and Susan, I really appreciate you spelling out the SMART objectives and then putting each of the objectives through the measures. That was really helpful. That's good work.
Yeah, it's a great tool because we can continue to do that as partners come on, or we think of, all the stuff in the chat box. So we'll just replicate it when we come up with other ways to measure. Ken, anything you wanted to add?
Thanks for inviting me, first of all. This is my first time. So
okay.
Thanks to Cheryl for suggesting me. My background is with IBM with 34 years. So anytime when I see all those objectives and everything with the exact same date of next year, it always makes me nervous when you see your deliverable as being the same date. But I can understand it seems like there was an awful lot of work and thought put into all this, and I appreciate that from everyone that's out there. So thank you very much. So looking forward to participating some more.
Great, thanks, Ken. Megan?
Yeah, I don't have anything else to add either. It's a great framework. So it is, I think you're exactly right, Sherry. It's this kind of roadmap for when you need to kind of continue that work. So this is great. Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome.
Jess? Okay, she's on mute. Cheryl, if you want to.
Yeah, thank you, Susan, for giving us the presentation. I feel like so much needs to be done. It's hard to prioritize which objectives to work on first. But I'm looking forward to doing this. This is a great start. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Cheryl. Jack?
I agree with pretty much what other people have said. It's really interesting for me to hear what other people prioritize and how they see things working together. And I think, this has been the beginning of a long and very convoluted collaboration. So I think we're on the right track.
Great. Carissa, I don't know if I pronounced your name correctly. You're on mute.
It's Carissa.
Oh, thank you. Okay.
It's tricky. I really don't have much to add. I agree with what everyone else has said so far.
Okay. Angela?
She's dropped off and left a message.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. Hi, this is Angela. Yeah, I thought I'd missed my chance, so I just wrote a message saying it looks good, and you're looking forward to doing the work together.
Great. And Bob at the Veterans Hospital.
Actually, not the hospital, Vermont State Office of Veterans Affairs.
Sorry.
But that's okay. I think that this is a great framework, and it's a major step forward in awareness and a mission and vision and getting some objectives.
Okay. Did I forget anyone? It seems like we've got a good start, and we can fine tune it and move forward. And I guess the big question would be is when do we have, like Susan said, do we wait a quarter or 6 months before we have the advisory board look at the progress with these objectives, or however they end up being refined. So, you know, we'll have to have a conversation about that maybe at the next advisory meeting. It might be good to think in 6 months terms, but, you know, more to come on that. I think our action steps are, Susan's gonna have a full report. We have the PDF of the presentation, and we've had this recorded. So we'll have all that available, and I think that one of the things we'll make sure to do is provide probably this video out, maybe on the YouTube station that the Brain Injury Association has, and then make sure that it goes out to the distribution list so that the people who've experienced a brain injury and family members and providers that aren't on this call can listen to the conversation and what we're trying to do. And we do have an email address that people can send comments to. So we'll collect some more information from that group. And we will provide the report to the feds because they are interested in that, along with our annual action plan. And we're doing our progress report right now that's due in the end of June. So I think I'll be able to upload some of this additional information so they're aware of the work that's going on. So I think, Sarah, if there's anything else, I want to make sure we can save this chat, Jess and Danny, because there's a lot of stuff in there. Anything else, Sarah?
I was just gonna say thank you, Suzanne. And oh, were you gonna say something, Susan?
Oh, I was just saying, I just realized the chat was at the bottom of my thing. I can see it now.
Yeah.
We can start all over because I can see the chat now.
I was just going to say thank you, Susan, for joining our advisory board meeting today and doing your presentation. And thank you, everybody, for joining the meeting and the great conversation. Our next meeting, our next advisory board meeting is September 14th from 1 to 3. And so I will, within the next week or so, send out an email reminder as well as the calendar invite to that, and kind of put together a draft agenda that you can add to. So I know we left off on some of our business that we need to get back to at our next advisory board meeting. So stay tuned for that. And then I guess, does anybody have anything else?
People are just thanking and thumbs up, great meeting. So we like that feedback. We'll try to send out an evaluation. We have a meeting evaluation we keep forgetting to send out. So we'll do that. All right. So thank you again.
And thank you for letting me be part of it. I always like learning about what states are doing. And I think it's always nice and energizing to see what people are doing and ideas they have. So thank you for letting me be a part of it. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks, everybody. Be well.
All right.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.